Hello and welcome back to First Place TV. My name is Tumelo Makgakga. I'm a qualified chartered accountant. I'm a registered tax practitioner and I'm a registered auditor. Today I want to discuss travel allowances and how these are taxed by SARS, and also what you need to think about when you want to claim your travel expenses for business purposes. Stay tuned. So what is a travel allowance? A travel allowance is any amount of money that you get from your employer who is compensating you for traveling for business purposes. So for example, going to clients and doing any kind of business that you do for your employer, but using your own personal vehicle. How is that travel allowance taxed in your salary? How is it considered by SARS, and how do you get a benefit if you want to claim taxable, business travel? So there are two types of travel allowances that I want us to consider here today. The first one is what is called a fixed travel allowance. A fixed travel allowance is when your employer gives you a fixed amount every single month for purposes of traveling. So you use your own personal vehicle to do client business. You are traveling up and down, doing whatever it is that you need to do using your personal vehicle, and your employer has agreed to give you a fixed amount every single month to compensate you for that. That is the first thing, fixed travel allowance. Then the second thing I want to touch on is what is called a reimbursement travel allowance. In this instance, what happens is your employer would say to you, they reimburse you per kilometer that you travel for business purposes. So you would have to go to a client first, you would have to travel first, and then come back to your employer and say, I have traveled 100 kilometers, I have traveled 200 kilometers. Then your employer would reimburse you per kilometer, and they would use a particular rate per kilometer. Now, of the two scenarios, I want to just first discuss the one where it's a reimbursement allowance, and we will then touch on the fixed travel allowance. Now, the reimbursement travel allowance, which I think is a bit more simpler and easier to understand. How is that taxed? So, like I said, you have to travel first, then come back to your employer, and then your employer would reimburse you based on a kilometer. Now, employers are different. So some companies would reimburse you using a higher rate. So for example, they might say, we reimburse you at 6 Rand per kilometer, 7 Rand per kilometer, 5 Rand per kilometer. Now, what is important to note here is that SARS has a recommended rate. And this rate is a rate which employers need to use if they do not want your travel allowance to attract additional tax. And I will explain what I mean by that. The SARS recommended rate, as of now, in 2024, as I record this video, is 484 cents per kilometer. So in other words, if your employer reimburses you at 484 cents per kilometer, there will be no additional tax on your travel allowance. But the moment your employer uses a rate per kilometer that is higher than 484 cents now in this current financial year or tax year, then any additional amount paid over and above the 484 cents will attract tax. What do I mean? Or what is an example of this scenario? If you travel 200 kilometers and your employer's policy is to reimburse you at 6 Rand per kilometer, so you would just then take 6 Rand times the 100 or 200 kilometers that you would have traveled, and then you would say, I'm expecting to receive a certain amount, whatever amount that you would get. But SARS is saying that because your employer reimburses you at a rate higher than the 484, we will tax you on the portion that is over and above the 484. So the first 484 cents will be tax-free, but the difference between the 6 Rand per kilometer and the 484 cents that your employer uses, that particular portion times the kilometers will be subjected to tax. Now, if we look at the other option, which is a monthly a monthly travel allowance, where your employer is giving you a monthly fixed amount, how is this amount particularly taxed? So how SARS approaches this particular one is to say that if your employer agrees to give you a fixed amount every single month for purposes of traveling or as a travel allowance, then the employer understands that most of this amount, majority of it, if not all of it, will be attributable to traveling for business purposes. Now, SARS says that we are not going to tax particularly 100% of this amount. We will, by default, only tax 80% of this amount. So 80% of that amount will be included as part of your taxable income, and on a monthly basis, you will be taxed. So for example, if your monthly fixed travel allowance amounts to 10,000 rands, this means that you would be paying tax on about 8,000 rand, which is 80% of the travel allowance. Now, the tricky thing, or the thing that you must know about this particular option, is that you need to keep a logbook, what is called a travel logbook, where you log all your kilometers. You must keep a record of the car that you are using. You must keep a record of the model of the car that you are using, and you must have information of whenever you travel, you must record that this was a business trip and it accounted for how many kilometers. So you must have an accurate record of you must have a logbook which is accurate, and it tracks all your trips as to which ones were business and which ones were private. Now, the assumption here, of course, if they are only including 80% in the taxable income, is that particularly about 20% will be private use of that travel allowance. Now, SARS is saying that, okay, if your employer is giving you this amount upfront, we want to tax it now, so that at the end of the year of assessment, when you prove to us through that logbook that yes, indeed, you were doing business travel and you were keeping your logbook as required by the legislation, then you can claim a refund on some of the tax that you would have paid on that 80% that was included on taxable income. You can check out your tracker company that can help you keep a logbook, and you just request that they send you a logbook of your travel from 1 March all the way to 28 or 29 February, which will have a record of all your travel. Then you can designate which ones were business and which ones were private. So even after you get those kilometers from your tracking company, it's also important to know that only business kilometers are deductible when you do your tax return. I know there's a lot of confusion, especially when it comes to the question that is commonly asked is, if I'm traveling from home and going to work, is that considered a business travel? The answer is no, that is personal travel, so that would not form part of your business kilometers traveled. Only business kilometers traveled are deductible, so you going from home to work is part of a travel, is part of personal travel. So I thought to clarify that one, because it always comes up when doing tax returns. Yeah, so obviously there's other types of allowances whereby your employer gives you right of use of the company car, and then you're driving around with a company car. I won't necessarily get into that, but it's taxed in a similar way. That particular fringe benefit would be taxable. If you've got right of use of your employer's car, maybe you can use it a certain amount of the time, 80%, 20% of the time. That also is included as part of your fringe benefit, and it will be taxed and should be included as part of the tax that you are paying. Like any other fringe benefit, if your employer contributes to medical aid, provident fund, etc., those are some of the fringe benefits that will be taxable when they get into your hands. The fact that you have that benefit will be taxable. So it's the same thing even when your employer gives you right of use of a motor vehicle, because maybe you have to travel to clients back and forth, but using their car and not necessarily your own car. So that will be a different scenario. But ladies and gents, as you know, at First Place we are registered accountants, registered tax practitioners, and registered auditors. So we are readily available to assist you with your income tax returns, your accounting needs, your auditing needs, and anything advisory related that you might need help with. So do not hesitate to reach out to me and my team should you need any help with anything. Do not forget to like, to share, to subscribe, and to comment. And we always value your input. Ask your questions on the comment section, and then we'll try our best to get back to each and every question, or to appreciate every comment that is made on this video or any other video for that matter. Cheers.